The sky was roaring. Her heart was racing. No parachute, no second chances. Just 30 seconds between life and death. In the split second before she hit the ground, she wondered, was this how her story would end, or was the impossible about to happen? A scream tore through the air, blending with the howling wind. From 30,000 feet above, everyone watching thought she was doomed. But as she plummeted toward the earth, something inside her refused to give in. No one in history had ever survived a jump like this, yet she was about to do the unthinkable. This is the story of how one woman jumped from the sky with nothing but a prayer and survived the impossible impact. The moment she stepped toward the open airplane door, time didn't just slow, it shuddered. Every sound, every breath, every memory became sharper, as if the universe itself wanted her to savor what could be her last moments alive. The world below was a mosaic of light and shadow, farmlands stretching endlessly, highways like silver threads, the horizon burning with the gold of late afternoon. But none of it mattered. Not really, because every ounce of her focus was locked on the endless sky, the taste of metal in her mouth, and the unthinkable decision she was about to make. People say your life flashes before your eyes before you die, but for her, it was more complicated. It wasn't a rush of childhood memories or lost loves. It was the weight of all the unfinished business, the things left unsaid, the pain and pride, the dreams she'd never chased. It was the face of her father, stoic at her high school graduation, fighting tears. Her mother's gentle hands bandaging a scraped knee. The first and last time she'd said, "I love you" to someone who broke her heart. And the endless, restless hunger for something more. A purpose, a test, a reason to believe she was truly alive. Her name was Emily Carter, and she had always felt invisible. Born in a small town outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, she grew up with big dreams and a bigger chip on her shoulder. She wanted to be an astronaut, a rock star, a storm chaser, anything that would make her unforgettable. But life had a way of grinding her down. By 28, she was working 2 jobs, dodging bills, and nursing a heartbreak that felt like it might never heal. So when the opportunity came for a once-in-a-lifetime skydiving trip with friends, she said yes, almost out of spite. But no one, not even Emily, could have predicted what would happen in the sky above rural Kansas that day. It was supposed to be just another thrill. The instructor, a man named Billy with an easy smile and too many tattoos, talked them through the steps. Trust the gear, trust your training, trust yourself. She nodded, heart hammering, the voice in her head screaming for an escape. As they soared to altitude, the world below growing smaller, Emily stared at her harness, fingers picking at the worn nylon straps, and wondered if this was the day she'd finally outrun her ghosts. Then chaos, a tangle of hands, a misunderstanding, a joke gone wrong. One moment, Billy was checking her harness. The next, someone bumped her from behind, sending her staggering toward the open hatch. In that split second, Emily realized the truth. She wasn't wearing a parachute. The mistake was catastrophic, irreversible, and it happened so fast that no one could react in time. She heard shouts, Billy's voice cracking, "Emily, no!" But gravity had already claimed her. The roar of the plane's engine was replaced by the deafening silence of the open sky, punctuated only by her own scream. She spun, tumbled, arms flailing, desperate for anything to hold on to. But there was nothing, just the blue void and the certainty that she was falling, falling, falling. 30,000 feet, over 5 miles. Every second she accelerated, the wind burning against her skin, her mind a storm of terror and clarity. There was no parachute, no miracle, no way out. And yet, as the shock gave way to raw, primal fear, Emily's thoughts crystallized. Is this it? Is this how I die? Alone? Terrified? A stupid mistake? But as the seconds dragged on, something strange happened.
The fear began to fade, not entirely, but enough for a new feeling to take hold. It was a kind of defiance, a furious refusal to be erased from the world without a fight. If I'm going to die, I want the world to know who I am. I want to leave a mark, even if it's only in these last seconds. She remembered the promise she made at 16 after her brother died in a car accident. Never let fear win. She remembered every night spent awake, wondering if her life meant anything, if she'd ever do something truly extraordinary. Well, Emily, she thought, this is your chance. The wing screamed past her ears, tearing tears from her eyes. Below, the earth was coming closer, impossibly fast. But Emily didn't close her eyes. She watched. She screamed her name into the void, daring fate to do its worst. "I am Emily Carter," she yelled, voice raw, lost in the endless sky. The earth rushed up to meet her, implacable, unfeeling, final.
Not because she accepted her fate, but because she faced it head-on, unafraid. And as the story of her impossible fall was just beginning, the world below had no idea what was about to crash into their reality. But Emily Carter, hurtling toward the earth, wasn't dead yet. She was alive, more alive than ever. There's a saying in Emily's family: no one just falls, they're pushed, or they jump. As Emily plummeted through the sky, those words echoed in her mind, twisting with every heartbeat, every gust of wind. And in the spinning chaos of her fall, her consciousness yanked her backward, back to the winding, complicated roads that led her to this impossible moment. She wasn't just a woman falling from the sky. She was the sum of every moment that had brought her to the edge. The earliest memory she could summon was of rain. Relentless, cold, drumming against the windows of a tiny house in Tulsa. Her mother had been sick for weeks, and Emily, just 6 years old, would climb onto her bed every night and whisper stories she'd made up, hoping to bring even a flicker of light to that dark room. Her mother would smile, weak but grateful, and brush Emily's hair from her forehead. "You have the heart of a lion, baby, but sometimes lions need to roar." The years blurred together after that. School was a battleground, full of teachers who misunderstood her daydreaming as laziness, classmates who sensed her difference and kept their distance. She was restless, always seeking escape. Her father, a mechanic, taught her the value of grit, of never backing down, but he also taught her that the world would never hand her anything she didn't fight for. Trust is earned, respect is fought for, and nobody gives you a parachute in this life. You have to build your own. It was her brother Jamie who really saw her. Jamie, 5 years older, fearless and wild. He was the first to sneak out at midnight to climb the water tower with her, the first to teach her how to drive, the first to show her that it was okay to break the rules if you were careful not to get caught. When Jamie died, the world collapsed. A drunk driver, a rain-slick road, a funeral with more silence than words. Emily's mother never fully recovered. Her father grew even more distant, and Emily learned to hold her pain like a secret weapon. She started writing letters to Jamie she'd never send, tucking them in books, in drawers, under her pillow. Sometimes she pretended he was still there, urging her forward. As she grew, so did her ambitions. She wanted more than Tulsa could offer, more than anyone expected her to reach for. But life's sharp edges kept cutting her down. First love was a boy named Mark, all easy smiles and whispered promises. He broke her heart the day after graduation, telling her he was leaving for Los Angeles. "I can't stay here," he'd said. "I need to fly." For years, those words haunted her. Maybe that's why she craved the sky, why she always felt pulled upward, away from the gravity of disappointment. She tried college, but the money ran out, tried love again, but trust was hard currency. At 28, her circle of friends was small.
just enough to fill a booth at the local bar. She masked her sadness with sarcasm, her fear with bravado, but on the inside, she was a storm. The skydiving trip wasn't her idea. It was Jessica's, her wildest friend, the one with the tattoos and the loud laugh. Jessica believed in living loud, in pushing everyone to the edge. You need to do something crazy, Em. Remind yourself you're still alive. Emily shrugged, but the idea latched onto her like a dare she couldn't back down from. She didn't tell anyone about the panic attacks, the nights she woke up gasping for air, the cold sweat of dreams where she was always falling, always just out of reach. Now, in freefall, all those memories collided. Every heartbreak, every lesson, every dream deferred. She wondered if fate was real, if every step she had taken had been leading her to this plummet, this impossible gamble. Was this what it meant to take control, to leap rather than be pushed? Her body tumbled, but her mind kept returning to the past. The kitchen table where she and Jamie planned their escape, the old Chevy they painted together, the laughter, the tears, the relentless drive to be more. She saw her mother's eyes on the day of Jamie's funeral, vacant, haunted, and somehow angry at the world for taking her son and leaving her daughter stranded. Maybe I was always falling, Emily thought. Maybe I never stopped. But as the wind roared in her ears, she realized something. Every time she got knocked down, every time she thought she'd reached the end, she stood up. She fought. Maybe she was never meant to have a parachute. Maybe she was meant to survive the impossible. And so, even as the ground raced closer, Emily Carter clung to her memories, her scars, her stubbornness. She would not vanish quietly, not after everything she'd endured. If this was the end, she would meet it on her own terms. But if fate had other plans, if there was a chance, even the tiniest sliver, she would fight for it with every breath, every memory, every ounce of strength she had left. The past didn't just explain why she was falling.
It showed her why she refused to surrender. For most people, decisions are made quietly, at kitchen tables, in the quiet dark, or with friends over drinks. But for Emily, the decision that would define her life didn't come with warning, logic, or comfort. It came like a lightning strike, shocking her out of numbness. The weeks before the jump were a blur, but now, as she hurtled through the sky, each memory returned, sharp as broken glass. It started as a joke between friends. Jessica, wild as ever, tossed the idea into the air over greasy diner fries at 2 a.m. We should all go skydiving, do something so crazy it scares the hell out of us. You in, Em? Emily laughed, rolled her eyes, but her chest tightened, a subtle warning she ignored. Her whole life, she'd learned to say yes to everyone else. Maybe this time, it was her turn. But the days leading up to the jump were anything but normal. Her job at the hardware store felt pointless. Customers complained, the manager snapped at her, and she couldn't shake the sense of drifting through someone else's life. Bills piled up. She fought with her father over nothing and everything. Every night sleep eluded her, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't share, fears she could barely name. Sometimes she sat alone in the bathtub, knees hugged to her chest, whispering apologies to the brother she missed with a pain that never dulled. One evening, she found herself staring at her own reflection, searching for the girl she used to be. She pressed her palm to the glass and, for the first time, spoke aloud the question that haunted her. Is this all there is? The answer came back in silence, the kind that makes your bones ache. That was the night she made her decision, not just to jump, but to stop running from herself. She would do something reckless, something unforgettable, if only to prove she could. She told Jessica, I'm in, but if I do this, I want to feel everything. No numbing, no hiding. I want to be terrified. Jessica hugged her so tightly she could hardly breathe. The preparation became a ritual. She watched endless videos of skydivers, read horror stories of equipment failures, and found herself both excited and sick with fear. She even drafted letters, one to her mom, one to her dad, one to Jamie, just in case. The words spilled out raw and honest, confessions she'd never dared to say out loud. "I'm sorry for the distance. I'm sorry I stopped believing in miracles." Her mother, hearing the plan, was furious. "Emily, don't you dare throw your life away for some thrill. Haven't we lost enough?" But Emily couldn't explain. Jessica. It wasn't about chasing adrenaline. It was about proving she was still alive, proving that the pain hadn't turned her to stone. The night before the jump, she barely slept. She lay awake, counting her heartbeats, feeling the familiar ache of loss and longing. In the early hours, she went outside, barefoot on the dewy grass, and stared up at the stars. "If you're out there, Jamie," she whispered, "give me a sign. Tell me I'll survive this." But all she got was the soft hum of insects, the universe silent as always. When dawn broke, she met Jessica and the others in the parking lot of the small airport. Laughter masked nerves, but Emily's hands shook as she signed the waiver, as she stepped into the jumpsuit, as she looked at the plane that would carry her higher than she'd ever been. As the plane climbed, so did her panic. She squeezed Jessica's hand until her knuckles turned white. "We're really doing this," Jessica grinned, fearless. "You ready?" Emily forced a nod, her heart pounding in her throat. Then, seconds that would change everything. The door opened, wind screamed, instructions blurred. In a tangle of adrenaline and fear, a mistake, a harness not checked, a step in the wrong direction, a life forever altered. Emily's last clear thought before the fall was a single, blazing truth. I chose this. For the first time, I chose to leap instead of stand still. Now, as she plummeted, the magnitude of that choice crashed over her. It wasn't about the jump. It was about finally saying yes to her own life, no matter the cost. If she survived, she swore she'd never let fear make her small again. If she died, at least she'd go out screaming her own name, defiant to the very end. And in the vast silence of the sky, for the briefest moment, Emily Carter wasn't afraid. She was free. "How did we end up here, Jamie?" she wondered, the question aching like an old bruise. Her phone buzzed. Jessica, full of energy, even over text. "Skydiving is booked for Saturday. Don't back out." Emily smiled, feeling a flicker of something like excitement. Or was it dread? She typed back, "Wouldn't dream of it." The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than explaining the truth, that she wasn't sure who she was anymore, or if she had the courage to change. Later, after work, she drove home on autopilot, the radio playing songs she couldn't name, the sky growing darker. She barely noticed the billboard advertising funeral services, but its tagline stuck in her mind. "It's never too late to start living." It made her laugh, a dark, hollow sound. Maybe it is, she thought. Or maybe that's what everyone tells themselves until something snaps. That night, as the rain began to fall, Emily sat at her kitchen table, stacks of unopened bills and takeout menus all around. She found herself dialing her mother's number, craving a connection she'd spent years running from. Her mother answered, voice tired but hopeful. And for a few minutes, Emily let herself slip back into a world where things were simple. "Do you remember the summer Jamie built that awful treehouse?" she asked, surprised by her own voice. "How could I forget?" her mother replied, laughter and sorrow entwined in her words. "He fell through the roof 3 times. For a moment, they both laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that felt almost like forgiveness. Emily wiped her eyes, promising herself she'd call more often. After the call, the weight of everything she'd lost pressed down on her. She paced her apartment, restless, haunted by the echo of Jamie's laughter and her mother's sadness. She pulled out the letters she'd written for the jump and read them again, feeling the ache in every word. "You don't get to choose your tragedies," she wrote,
but you do get to choose what you do with them. Saturday came faster than she'd expected. She met Jessica and the group at dawn, the parking lot buzzing with nervous energy. The instructor, Billy, welcomed them with a grin and a pep talk. Emily could barely hear him over the thud of her own heart. She felt like a passenger in her own body, following the motions, trying not to think too much about the fact that her life was about to be suspended by little more than fabric and faith. On the way to the plane, Jessica squeezed her hand. "Promise me something, Em." Emily raised an eyebrow. "If you hate this, I'll never make you do something crazy again." Emily forced a laugh. "Deal."
"But if I love it, you owe me dinner at that terrible diner." Jessica grinned. "You're on." As they boarded the small plane, Emily felt an odd sense of peace. Maybe it was surrender. Maybe it was hope. She watched the ground recede through the window, the world shrinking into patches of green and gold. "I'm really doing this," she thought. "I'm really here." She caught Billy's eye as he checked her harness, smiling, confident, his hands steady. "You ready?" he asked, his tone gentle. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. She was as ready as she'd ever be. Then the door opened, and the noise of the wind filled the cabin. Time twisted, slowed. Emily stepped forward, the rush of air like a baptism. In that moment, every regret, every heartbreak, every loss she'd ever known dissolved into the roar of the sky. She looked back once, at Jessica, at the instructor, at the life she was leaving behind, if only for a moment. Then she jumped. And as the earth raced up to meet her, Emily Carter knew nothing would ever be the same. There is a silence that only comes before the impossible, a heavy, trembling stillness that presses against your ribs and makes your breath shallow. For Emily, the days leading up to the jump became a study in this silence, each hour thicker with anticipation, each night heavier with doubt. She had never been so aware of the clock ticking. It felt as if the whole world were watching, waiting for her to flinch. The week before the jump was a haze of preparation and paranoia. Emily found herself Googling skydiving accidents late at night, her fingers cold as she scrolled through terrifying stories and miraculous survivals. She knew the odds. She read statistics and safety manuals, watched videos of first-time jumpers' faces as they tumbled out into the blue. But no amount of research could prepare her for the wild, twisting cocktail of fear and hope that lived inside her chest. Jessica, ever the cheerleader, messaged her daily with memes, countdowns, and irreverent jokes. "You're gonna be fine, Em. If you chicken out, at least fake a good feint for TikTok." Emily laughed at the jokes, grateful for the distraction, but she couldn't escape the gnawing sense that this was more than just a thrill-seeking weekend. It felt fated, like a test she'd been training for her whole life. She prepared meticulously, checking her gear list over and over. Jumpsuit, helmet, sneakers, hair tied back. She bought a GoPro, imagining the story she'd be able to tell if everything went right. At the same time, she drafted another letter to her mother, sealed it in an envelope with trembling hands, and tucked it into the glove box of her car. "If something happens to me, don't let them say I was reckless. Tell them I was searching for something bigger than fear." The night before, sleep was impossible. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, the glow of her phone screen lighting up the darkness. She scrolled through old photos, her and Jamie at the lake, her parents in the kitchen, Jessica making silly faces at a party. For a moment, she wished she could freeze time, stay forever in those small, safe memories. But even as she longed for comfort, she knew she was being pulled somewhere else, toward the edge, towards something unknown and essential. That morning, the group met at the small airport just as dawn was breaking. The air was cool and sharp, the sky painted with streaks of pink and gold. Emily felt the first tremors of adrenaline as she walked across the tarmac. Billy, the instructor, greeted each of them with a grin, his confidence both comforting and maddening. "It's just another day at the office, folks.
The ground will be right where you left it. Inside, the group went through safety checks, harness adjustments, and last-minute paperwork. Emily tried to listen, to focus on each step, but her mind wandered, replaying every choice that had brought her here. She watched Jessica high-five a nervous-looking stranger, saw another jumper vomit quietly in the corner. She heard Billy's voice, calm and steady, explaining emergency procedures. In case of a malfunction, don't panic. Trust your backup. Trust your instincts. The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing. Emily could feel her own pulse in her fingertips. She checked her harness, then checked it again, running her hands along the straps, feeling every buckle, every seam. This was real. This was happening. The walk to the plane felt endless. The group shuffled in silence, eyes wide, hands trembling. Emily glanced at Jessica, who flashed her a thumbs up. She forced a smile, but her stomach twisted. As she climbed the steps into the plane, she felt as though she were climbing out of her old life, every step an act of defiance. Inside, the instructor gave the final briefing. When the door opens, remember, don't look down, just jump. Trust the training, trust yourself. Emily nodded, her mouth dry. The engine roared to life, the plane rumbling down the runway. As they lifted off, she watched the ground fall away, the world shrinking, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. For the first few minutes, the mood was nervous excitement. Jokes, cheeky laughter, the kind of camaraderie that only comes when everyone knows they're about to do something insane. But as the plane climbed higher, the reality of what was about to happen settled over them like a shroud. Emily stared at the clouds drifting by the window, wondering what Jamie would say if he were here. Would he be proud? Would he be terrified? She thought of her mother, her father, the life she'd lived and the one she was reaching for. She wanted to believe this was a beginning, not an end. The moment came. Billy called her name. She stood, legs unsteady, heart thundering. The door slid open and the wind screamed into the cabin, wild and cold and electric. Everything else vanished. Every fear, every regret, every second of doubt. She stepped forward. For one split second, she hovered at the threshold, the world holding its breath. And then, with a force she didn't know she possessed, Emily Carter advanced into the unknown, leaping into the blue. Nothing would ever be the same. The moment her feet left the plane, Emily Carter was not falling. She was flying. For a heartbeat, there was no gravity, no fear, only the fierce rush of wind and the wild, impossible freedom she had craved for years. The world vanished. There was only the sky, the roar in her ears, and the thundering pulse of her own heart. But that illusion shattered in seconds. The wind slammed into her body, forcing her limbs into a wild spin. The air was so cold it burned her skin, ripped at her clothes, and made her eyes water so much she could barely see. Panic surged, fierce and primal. Instinct took over. Arms out, legs bent, body arched, the movements drilled in her in training. But none of it mattered now, because there was no parachute strapped to her back. For a moment, Emily refused to believe it. She patted frantically at her shoulders, feeling for the harness that wasn't there. Her mind screamed in denial. This can't be happening. There has to be something. This isn't real. I can't die like this. But there was nothing. Just the chilling slap of reality and the terrible, sickening realization that she was plummeting with nothing but hope. Her thoughts fractured into flashes. Jessica's grin as she boarded the plane, her mother's voice on the phone filled with warning and love, Jamie's crooked smile urging her on from some lost corner of memory.
All those moments, every goodbye, every regret, every secret wish blazed across her mind like lightning as she tumbled through the blue. The world around her was silent chaos. The ground below was growing, surging closer with every screaming second.
She could see the shadow of the plane fading above, the patchwork of fields and roads rushing up, the sun glinting off car windshields miles below. A strange calm settled in her chest. Not acceptance, not yet, but a clarity she'd never known. If this is it, then I want my last thoughts to matter. She tried to control her fall, to steady her body, to aim for something, anything, but physics was indifferent to hope. She spun, twisted, and then, by some miracle, found her center. The wind roared past her ears, drowning out all sound but her own ragged breaths. The world blurred at the edges. Remember the training. Spread your arms, stay loose, don't panic. As if those lessons could save her now. As seconds stretched into eternity, Emily became acutely aware of every sensation. The icy air slicing her face, the ache in her muscles, the way her heart seemed to shrink and expand in her chest. She wondered if anyone on the ground could see her, a tiny, tumbling speck against the endless sky. She wondered if anyone would remember her name. She thought of the letter she'd left for her mother. "I'm sorry. I was looking for something bigger than fear." She thought of Jamie, always the brave one, always telling her to jump, to live without regret. "I hope I made you proud, Jamie." She thought of all the things she would never do, the places she'd never see, the people she'd never forgive, the dreams she'd never chase. And then, somewhere between panic and surrender, Emily made a choice. She screamed, not in fear, but in fury. She screamed her name into the void, screamed for every missed opportunity, every wasted year, every moment she let fear win. "I am Emily Carter." Her voice was swallowed by the sky, but in that instant she felt more alive than ever. Time distorted. Seconds became lifetimes. She felt herself falling faster, the ground swelling up to meet her with murderous intent. She fought against the despair, refusing to let her last moments be stolen by terror. She remembered every lesson Jamie taught her. You don't get to pick how you die, but you get to choose how you face it. In her final moments, as the world rushed toward her, Emily Carter did not close her eyes. She opened them wider. She wanted to see everything, to leave nothing behind. She wanted her last memory to be the sky, wild and boundless, just before the end. And then, with a rush of wind and a final defiant roar, Emily Carter tumbled headlong toward the earth, ready for whatever would come. 30,000 feet is a long way to fall, but as Emily Carter hurtled through the open sky, it no longer felt like distance. It felt like an eternity, measured in heartbeats and silent screams. Each second stretched and twisted, the air so cold and thin it stung her throat and set her nerves ablaze. She was aware of everything. The rush of blood in her ears, the brutal sting of the wind, the distant, impossible patchwork of earth rushing up to claim her. She wondered, at first, if time was truly slowing, or if it was just her brain, desperate to process the impossible. Each moment fractured into fragments, a flash of Jamie's laugh, the taste of her mother's apple pie, the ache of her first heartbreak, the heat of a summer day by the lake. Her senses flooded, her memories vivid and raw, as if her mind were trying to compress an entire life into a few final seconds. Adrenaline coursed through her body, sharp as lightning, making every muscle tense and shudder. Instinctively, she tried to slow her fall. Arms and legs splayed, remembering scraps of advice from training that now felt like cruel jokes. Stay relaxed, find your center, breathe. But there was no center, only chaos, no breath, only wind that stole the air from her lungs. As she fell, the world around her seemed to splinter. The roar of wind faded in and out. Sometimes it was deafening, a relentless scream. Other times, a low, mournful hum that felt like a lullaby for the doomed. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision. The sun flickered through clouds, blinding her one moment, bathing her in gold the next. The ground, fields, trees, roads, rivers, grew steadily, inexorably, until she could make out individual shapes, even tiny cars crawling along distant highways. Emily's mind, frantic and sharp, raced with calculations. How long do I have? 30 seconds? 20? She counted heartbeats but lost track. Is this what dying feels like? Strangely, it wasn't just fear anymore. It was awe, a stunned reverence at the vastness of the sky, the beauty of the world she'd never really noticed from the ground. She thought about Jamie, her wild laughter, her stubborn loyalty, her words echoing in Emily's head. You need to do something crazy, Em. Remind yourself you're alive. Was this crazy enough? Was she truly alive, or only at the brink of becoming memory?
Delirium crept in at the edges. The roar of wind became voices, Jamie's calling her to be brave, her mother's whispering prayers in the darkness. She wondered if this was what people meant by life flashing before your eyes, or if she was slipping into some final hallucination before the end. Then, in a moment of strange clarity, she saw herself not as the girl who fell, but as the woman who leapt. I chose this, she thought fiercely, even as her body tumbled. Not the fall, not the mistake, but the courage to face it. She remembered every failure and every victory, how she'd always gotten back up, even when the world tried to break her. If this was the end, it would not be a quiet surrender. Her survival instinct flared, wild and defiant. She twisted, searching for any hope, maybe a body of water, a patch of trees, something, anything to soften the blow. Logic told her nothing would help from this height, but she fought anyway, refusing to let go. With desperate precision, she aimed her body, trying to control the spin, minimize the impact, buy herself even a fraction of a second more. The seconds bled into each other, time becoming a strange and endless landscape. She remembered holding Jamie's hand at the edge of the lake, the thrill of their first dive, the way he squeezed her fingers and whispered, "Jump, Em. Life's better when you jump." She almost laughed, a sharp, breathless sound stolen by the wind. Emily forced herself to focus, to stay present. Don't lose consciousness. Not yet. She scanned the ground, spots of color resolving into fields, farmhouses, maybe a barn. She remembered hearing stories of people who survived impossible falls, sheer luck, miracle landings. If there's even the tiniest chance, I have to fight for it. Her body ached, her skin numb, her eyes stinging with wind and tears. Every heartbeat screamed with the knowledge, this is it. This is how it ends, or how it begins. In the final seconds, everything sharpened, colors brighter, sounds clearer, her will an unbreakable flame. She screamed again, not in fear, but in defiance. I am Emily Carter. The earth hurtled toward her, unstoppable. And just before impact, time itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether her story would end in tragedy or in the impossible.
There was no more fear, only a clarity that cut deeper than any pain. Every heartbeat, every breath, every memory converged on a single unstoppable point. The final seconds stretched into infinity. Emily saw everything in exquisite detail. A patchwork of golden fields, the glint of water in a distant pond, the shadow of a barn at the edge of a forest. Her body, numb from cold and adrenaline, moved on instinct.
She angled herself, desperate to land feet first, to minimize the damage, to cling to the slimmest thread of hope. The training echoed in a mind, not as words, but as a primal urge to survive. Bend your knees, tuck your arms, roll with the impact, protect your head, survive. She braced for death, but her spirit refused to surrender. In her final instant, she remembered the stories of people who fell from impossible heights and lived. A Russian flight attendant, a skydiver in World War II, a child thrown from a burning building. Miracles, each of them. Could I be one of them? The question burned through her as the ground rushed up. Then, with a violence that defied words, the world exploded. The impact was not one sensation, but 1,000. An impossible force crushing her legs, a scream tearing through her chest, the world blinding white, then red, then absolute black. There was a sound like the earth itself cracking open, a jolt so severe that it shattered all thought, all sense, all hope. Emily felt herself shatter and splinter, her bones cracking, her breath stolen by the sheer violence of the collision. Time became meaningless. She did not know if she screamed or if her voice was lost before it left her throat. She did not know if she was alive, dying, or already gone. For a long, endless moment, there was only pain, searing, electric, consuming every inch of her body and mind. And yet, somewhere in that storm, a stubborn flame survived. Through the agony, she sensed the rough, unyielding ground beneath her. The world was muffled, far away, but not entirely gone. She tasted blood in her mouth. Her lungs struggled for air, raw and burning. There was a strange metallic ringing in her ears, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Images flickered through her mind. Memories, hallucinations, hopes, blurring together in the haze. Jamie's face hovered over her, eyes filled with pride and sadness. Her mother's hands, warm and trembling, caressed her hair. Jessica's laugh echoed, distant and urgent. "You're not done, Em, not yet."
The pain ebbed and surged, waves crashing against the shore of her consciousness. She tried to move, anything, even a finger, but her body rebelled, limp and foreign. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but something inside refused to break. She focused on the smallest details, the roughness of dirt beneath her palm, the sharp scent of crushed grass, the pounding of her own heart. Gradually, as the shock faded, Emily realized she was not dead. Not yet. Every inch of her screamed in protest, but somewhere deep within, a will to survive flickered stubbornly. Is this a miracle, or is it the beginning of the end? She didn't know. She didn't care. All that mattered was that she was still here. The world slowly filtered back in. The chirp of birds, the distant drone of a car engine, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily opened her eyes, blinking against the sunlight. The sky above was impossibly blue, endless and indifferent. For a moment she wanted to laugh, to weep, to scream at the absurdity of being alive. But the story was not over. The pain was only beginning. And somewhere, beneath the agony, Emily Carter understood. She had done the impossible. She had survived the fall. Now, the real fight would begin. After the chaos of the fall, there was nothing. No pain, no wind, no world. Only a silence so complete it felt holy. A vast and infinite hush that swallowed Emily whole. For a moment she wondered if she had finally crossed over, if this was what waited after death. Not darkness, but a kind of endless peace. Her body, battered and broken, floated in that silence, untethered from time or pain. In this strange, weightless void, memories shimmered in and out of existence.
She saw Jamie as a child, his hand in hers, running through fields of sunflowers. She felt the warm embrace of her mother, the pride in her father's eyes, the laughter of friends around a bonfire at night. The regrets that had haunted her for years, words left unsaid, love lost, chances missed, seemed to dissolve, replaced by a gentle forgiveness. In that silence, Emily forgave herself. But the silence was not empty. It was full of possibility, a space where anything could be rewritten, where every ending might become a beginning. A part of her wanted to stay in that softness, to drift forever on the edge of memory. But another part, stubborn and bright, clung to life. In the distance, a sound pierced the hush, a single bird calling, pure and insistent, cutting through the void. The pain returned, first as a flicker, then a flood.
A white-hot wave of agony radiated from her legs, her chest, her shattered body. Emily gasped, the silence shattering, and she realized with a start that she was not dead. Not yet. She lay still, afraid to move, listening to the world slowly creep back. The chirp of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of life continuing as if nothing had happened. With immense effort, she opened her eyes. The sky above was blindingly blue, the clouds drifting lazily, impossibly far from the chaos she'd just endured. She turned her head, every movement a scream, and saw the world as if for the first time. Sharp, real, achingly beautiful. The grass beneath her cheek was cool and wet. A tiny ant crawled across her wrist, unconcerned with miracles or tragedy. Emily tried to move her fingers. Pain shot up her arm, but they twitched. She focused on breathing, on the raw, animal effort of staying alive. Each inhale was a battle, each exhale a triumph. I'm still here. I'm still here. Voices drifted on the wind, distant, panicked, calling her name. She couldn't answer, couldn't form words, but she listened, clinging to the sound as proof that she hadn't vanished. In her mind, Jamie's voice whispered, fierce and proud, "You did it, Em. You survived." Tears spilled down her face, salty and hot, mixing with dirt and blood. The world around her seemed new, reborn. She noticed everything, the flutter of wings in the trees, the shimmer of sunlight on a puddle, the pulse in her broken body. Pain threatened to drown her, but with every second, her will grew stronger. You're not dead. Not yet. As minutes crawled by, the reality of survival dawned on her. She remembered stories of impossible luck, of people who walked away from disasters no one could explain. Was she one of them now? Was this fate, or defiance, or simply a twist in the universe? Gradually, the voices grew louder, shouts, footsteps, the thud of running feet. Someone knelt beside her, hands gentle on her face, a voice full of shock and awe. She's alive. Oh my God, she's alive. Emily wanted to speak, to explain the miracle, but all she could do was blink and breathe, clinging to the world with every ounce of strength. The pain was overwhelming, but beneath it, a single radiant truth glowed. She had survived. Against every odd, every law of nature, she was alive. The silence that followed was not the silence of death, but of the world holding its breath, astonished, grateful, waiting to see what would happen next.
For the first time in her life, Emily Carter felt truly seen. She was not a victim, not a ghost, not just another tragedy. She was a miracle. Emily Carter lay suspended in a space where the boundaries of reality had all but dissolved. She drifted in and out of consciousness, hovering at the thin and fragile line between life and death. Pain pulsed through her in relentless waves, but sometimes the agony faded into a dreamlike fog, and she floated beyond her body,
an observer to her own impossible survival. Sounds came first, distant, warped, like echoes from another world. Voices urgent and muffled. "She's breathing! Get a pulse! Move, move!" The rapid shuffle of feet, a siren's wail, someone shouting into a radio. Cold hands on her face, a bright light stabbing behind her eyelids. Emily wanted to speak, to cry out, but her body would not obey. She was both present and absent, tethered to the world only by the thinnest strand. Between the moments of awareness, she slipped into visions, a patchwork of memories and hallucinations. She saw Jamie standing in the sunlight, hands in his pockets, smiling gently. "You're tougher than you think, Em," he said. The scent of apple pie drifted past, her mother humming in the kitchen, the safe warmth of home beckoning her to rest. She saw her own face reflected in 1,000 fragments, young, old, bruised, fearless, terrified. All the versions of herself she'd ever been. Each image shimmered, then dissolved. At times, Emily was certain she was dying. Her mind soared above the scene, watching paramedics work over her battered body, cutting away clothes, checking vital signs, whispering words of encouragement. "Hang on, sweetheart. Stay with us. We've got you." The rhythm of the world became a distant thrum, machines beeping, helicopter blades chopping the air, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with blood and earth. Then suddenly she was falling again, weightless, floating through a tunnel of swirling colors and half-remembered songs. She sensed Jamie beside her, his laughter echoing, pulling her onward. A warmth flooded her, a love so profound it felt like a second heartbeat. Was this death? Or was it something else? A threshold she was being invited to cross, a door opening into the unknown. But every time the darkness threatened to claim her, something anchored Emily to life. A shout, a hand squeezing hers, the metallic taste of oxygen in her nose. She heard her mother's voice, not in memory, but in reality, sobbing, "Please, Emily, come back. Please don't leave me." The desperation in that plea cut deeper than any pain. Emily clung to it, fighting through the fog, refusing to surrender. The hospital lights burned through the haze. She drifted in and out, the world a blur of faces, doctors in blue scrubs, her mother weeping, Jessica pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. Machines beeped and hissed. Her body felt alien, heavy, unresponsive. At one point, she heard a doctor murmur, "It's a miracle she survived. I've never seen anything like it." Someone else replied, "If she makes it through the night, she has a chance." Emily's mind teetered on the brink. Sometimes she slipped away, carried by waves of delirium, where she was running through endless fields or soaring through the sky, Jamie always just ahead. Other times she was painfully, brutally awake, trapped in a body racked with pain, unable to speak, forced to listen to every word, every prayer for her survival. She heard her mother pray aloud, "God, if you let her live, I'll do anything. Take me instead. Just save my daughter." Emily wanted to answer, to reach out, to say she wasn't ready to leave, but all she could do was exist, silent and suspended. Hours blurred together. Light shifted, voices changed, night deepened into morning. Sometimes she felt warmth, a hand on her cheek, a blanket pulled up, Jessica's voice reading stories, trying to coax her back from the edge. Sometimes there was only cold and fear and the sense that she was still falling, deeper and deeper into the unknown. Yet even in her darkest moments, Emily felt the spark of defiance that had always driven her. She refused to fade quietly. She clung to the thread of life, drawing strength from the voices around her, from the love that refused to let her go. Finally, As the first rays of dawn crept through the hospital window, Emily Carter stirred. The pain was excruciating, but she welcomed it. It meant she was alive. Her eyes fluttered open. Above her, her mother gasped, clutching her hand. Jessica sobbed, whispering, "You did it, Em. You're back." Between life and death, Emily had found her way home. The miracle of Emily Carter's survival was only the beginning of the battle. In the stunned seconds after her fall, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then reality came rushing in, a flurry of panic, shouts, and frantic movement. Someone screamed for help, voices cracked with disbelief. "She's alive! My God, she's alive!"
In an instant, shock gave way to action. The first responders were volunteers from the nearby town, racing down dirt roads and battered trucks, their radios crackling with disbelief. "We've got a female, late 20s, critical trauma from a skydiving accident. No parachute. Repeat, no parachute." The dispatcher's voice stuttered. The impossible was now their emergency. Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, barely aware of the chaos around her. The pain was a wildfire, but her mind hovered above it, a fragile thread connecting her to the world. The paramedics surrounded her, moving with practiced urgency, checking her airway, searching for a pulse, cutting away the tattered jumpsuit. One pressed fingers to her wrist, another placed oxygen under her nose. A woman's voice trembled. "We need medevac, now. Start a line, get vitals. She's going into shock." Jessica arrived breathless, nearly collapsing beside Emily. "Em, can you hear me? Stay with me, please." She gripped Emily's hand, her own shaking violently, tears streaking her face. She whispered desperate words, as if her voice alone could anchor Emily to life. Emily heard it all from a great distance, the sirens approaching, the flurry of commands, the rustle of medics unpacking gear. The world blurred between color and darkness, the taste of blood sharp on her tongue. Sometimes she thought she was back in the sky, falling again. Sometimes she drifted in the warm, golden comfort of Jamie's voice, urging her to hold on. A helicopter arrived, blades pounding the earth, dust swirling in angry circles. The paramedics shouted over the roar, strapping Emily onto a stretcher with infinite care. They called out injuries in clipped voices. "Multiple fractures, suspected spinal trauma, BP dropping, let's move." Emily was lifted, jostled, the air thick with urgency. The flight to the hospital was a battle against time. A paramedic pressed a mask to her face, murmuring, "You're going to be okay. Stay with us, Emily. Just a little longer." Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, catching glimpses of faces above her, some grim, some hopeful. The city below blurred by, and the world shrank to a tunnel of pain and noise. In the emergency room, a team of doctors descended on her, their voices overlapping in a storm of orders. Scissors snipped away the remnants of her clothing, machines beeped, monitors flashed, IVs sneaked into her veins. A woman's voice hovered above. "Emily, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can."
She tried, her fingers twitching, a signal of life, however small. Hours vanished in a feverish blur. X-rays, CT scans, shouted numbers, urgent hands working to stabilize her battered body. Somewhere nearby, her mother sobbed in a chair, white-knuckled, praying aloud. Jessica paced the hallway, eyes wild with hope and terror, refusing to leave. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Reporters gathered at the hospital, camera crews clamoring for details. Skydiver survives fall without parachute. The town buzzed with the impossible news, strangers gathering in the waiting room, some weeping, others simply staring in awe. Inside the sterile world of trauma and medicine, Emily hovered between waking and dreaming. She heard the doctors marvel. Her vitals are holding. This doesn't make sense. She felt the burn of needles, the cold press of machines, the strange float of drugs in her blood. Sometimes pain spiked so sharp it dragged her back into her body, and she gasped for air. Other times, she slipped back into dreams of sunlight and laughter, Jamie's hand guiding her toward the light. Every minute was a fight. Her body trembled with the effort to survive, battered but unbroken. The hours stretched, each moment of victory snatched from death. Outside the window, the world turned, morning light giving way to dusk, prayers whispered in every tongue, the hospital waiting, breathless, to see if Emily Carter would become a legend or just another ghost. In that liminal place, hovering between life and legend, Emily Carter fought with everything she had. And in the eyes of everyone who watched, family, friends, strangers, she was already something more than just a survivor. She was the girl who defied the impossible, and now the world would never forget her name. Light returned slowly, like dawn after the longest night. Emily Carter awoke to a world that seemed too bright, too loud, too filled with the scent of antiseptic and the distant hum of hospital machines. For a moment, she couldn't remember who she was or why every nerve in her body screamed. But as the fog faded, fragments of reality cut through. Pain, voices, memories of falling, and the raw miracle of survival. She blinked, fighting to open her swollen eyes. The ceiling above was a blur of white. There were faces around her, some familiar, some strangers. A nurse leaned over, soft hands checking her pulse. "Emily, can you hear me? You're in the hospital."
You survived a skydiving accident. You're safe. Safe. The word echoed, hollow and absurd. Emily's body told another story. Pain radiated from every limb. Her legs were leaden and numb. Her ribs felt splintered. Her head pulsed with a deep, dizzy ache. She tried to move her hands, flinching at the sharp shock in her wrist. Her lips parted, but only a dry croak escaped. Her mother's face appeared, streaked with tears, hovering at the edge of the bed. "Emily, thank God! Baby, you're awake!" The words dissolved into sobs as she clutched Emily's hand, kissing her knuckles again and again. Jessica stood behind, eyes rimmed red, trying to smile through her own grief and awe. Emily wanted to reassure them, to prove she was still herself. But the smallest movement was a battle. The effort left her breathless and trembling. She closed her eyes, fighting panic. What if I'm paralyzed? What if I never walk again? Fear gnawed at the edges of her mind, threatening to undo her fragile grip on hope. The days blurred together in a haze of pain and medication. Surgeons came and went, explaining injuries and procedures in calm, professional tones. Multiple fractures, severe spinal bruising, but no complete severance. You're lucky, beyond lucky. Each time, Emily searched their faces for honesty. She feared the word miracle, afraid it might mean they expected her to defy fate forever, to live as a symbol rather than a woman. Physical therapists arrived with gentle encouragement. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. Let's try moving your toes." The effort was agony. Sometimes her legs answered, sometimes they didn't. Every inch of progress was hard-won and uncertain, but each sign of life was a victory. Emily clung to every sensation, a tingling in her toes, the twitch of a muscle, the faintest movement of her foot. "You're making history," one nurse whispered. "No one's ever seen anything like this." There were setbacks, fevers, panic attacks, moments when despair threatened to swallow her whole. Emily woke some nights tangled in IV lines, soaked in sweat, certain she was falling all over again. She clung to the voices around her, Jessica reading her magazines, her mother whispering prayers, nurses calling her our miracle girl. Sometimes she resented the title, wanting only to be herself, a woman broken, scared, and fighting for her life. The hospital became a strange new world, full of tests and routines, alarms and reassurances. Outside, the world watched, hungry for updates. Reporters staked out the lobby. Headlines called her the girl who fell from the sky. She was a phenomenon.
But Emily felt deeply, fiercely human, aching for privacy, terrified of being defined by a single impossible act. Her body healed slowly, painfully. Plates and pins in her legs, stitches across her scalp, a brace holding her neck. The doctors marveled at her will to fight, but Emily knew it was more than will. It was survival, pure and relentless. "I'm not finished," she told herself, "and I'm not just a headline. I'm still here." As the days passed, Emily learned to celebrate the small victories. The first time she sat up unassisted, the day she wiggled her toes, the moment she laughed again at one of Jessica's terrible jokes. Her family wept at every milestone, hope slowly replacing fear. Each day brought a new struggle, but also a new sense of purpose, a determination to reclaim her life, whatever that life would look like. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold beyond the hospital window, Emily took her mother's hand and whispered, "I want to try again. I want to live." Tears fell, joy and relief mingling. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Emily Carter believed she might win. Her story was no longer about the fall. It was about rising, inch by inch, into the life she never thought she'd have again. Recovery was nothing like the movies. There was no soaring music, no miraculous montage of swift progress. For Emily Carter, each day in the hospital and rehabilitation center was an unrelenting trial. It was pain, frustration, humiliation, and sometimes tiny, hard-won victories that felt like miracles. The mornings began before dawn with the shrill beeping of monitors and the first assessment by nurses. "Can you feel this?" a nurse would ask, pressing a cold metal instrument to her legs, her feet. Sometimes Emily could, sometimes she couldn't. On the worst days, she pretended she could, afraid of the disappointment in their eyes and her own. On the best days, a spark of sensation would jolt through her toes and she would cry, not from pain, but from relief and desperate hope. Physical therapy was torture and salvation.
Every movement was a battle, learning to sit up, then to stand, then to take a single step with a walker. Muscles atrophied by weeks of immobility screamed in protest. Emily's body was a battlefield, bruised, stitched, aching, yet refusing to surrender. More than once, she broke down in tears in front of her therapist, sobbing, "I can't do this." But her team, and her mother and Jessica, refused to let her give up. "You survived the impossible, Em," Jessica would remind her. "You can do this too." Some days, progress seemed to evaporate. Her legs would go numb again. Fevers would rack her body. She battled nightmares, visions of falling, of screaming through the sky with no parachute. Sometimes, she woke soaked in sweat, unsure if she was still alive. The doctors prescribed new medications. The hospital chaplain visited, offering prayers, a listening ear, and quiet reassurance. "Your life has meaning, Emily. You were saved for a reason. Don't let the darkness steal that from you." Despite it all, Emily fought. She learned to measure her life in the smallest increments. A morning without pain, a day when she could feed herself, the first time she brushed her own hair. She learned patience, the most brutal lesson of all. Her injuries forced her to accept help for everything: washing, dressing, going to the bathroom. The loss of independence was a wound no surgery could heal. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to reclaim herself. Her muscles strengthened, her legs trembled, but they held her weight for longer each day. She took her first steps, awkward, shuffling, but undeniably hers. Her mother wept with pride. Jessica cheered, filming each milestone for friends and family who clung to Emily's journey as if it were their own. Emily's story spread far beyond the hospital. Letters arrived from around the world. Skydivers who'd lost friends, survivors of tragedies, strangers inspired by her defiance of death. "You are proof that miracles exist," one letter said. "When I feel like giving up, I think of you." For the first time, Emily felt the weight of being a symbol. Not a burden, but a responsibility. Yet fame brought its own problems. Some journalists camped outside the rehab center, hungry for new footage or a single quote. Internet trolls called her a liar, accused her of faking the story, or mocked her for surviving only to become a cripple.
Emily shut out the noise as best she could, focusing on the people who mattered and the daily challenge of recovery. There were moments of laughter, Jessica pushing her in a wheelchair far too fast down the hospital hallway, her mother sneaking in homemade cookies, the therapist telling corny jokes to distract her from the pain. There were moments of despair, too, when Emily was certain she would never escape the shadow of her fall, never be normal again. But hope returned in unexpected ways. On a quiet afternoon, she watched the sun streaming through the window, casting a golden glow on her bandaged legs. For the first time since the accident, she whispered to herself, "I want to live. Not just survive, live." The words were a turning point, a promise to herself. With time, Emily's strength grew, not just in her body, but in her heart. She dreamed again, not of falling, but of walking on her own, of feeling the grass beneath her feet, of laughing without fear. Her journey was far from over, but she was moving forward. Inch by inch, day by day, Emily Carter was relearning to live. And that, she realized, was the greatest miracle of all. The day Emily Carter left the hospital was nothing like she had imagined. There was no swelling music, no parade, no perfect ending. Instead, the world outside was overwhelming. Too bright, too noisy, too fast. The sun hurt her eyes, the wind felt sharp and new against her skin. She had spent months protected by the careful routines of nurses and therapists, safe in a world of beeping machines, reassuring voices, and constant vigilance. Out here, everything was uncertain. Her mother pushed her wheelchair out of the automatic doors. For a moment, Emily just sat, blinking in the late afternoon sun, staring at the cars rolling by, the people coming and going, most of whom would never know how close she'd come to disappearing forever. She felt exposed, like the whole world could see her scars, her limp, the brace around her neck, the way she clung to her mother's hand. Jessica waited by the car, cheering and waving a small homemade sign. "Welcome home, Emily." Her laughter was infectious, and Emily smiled for the first time that day. But as she was helped into the car, she realized that the hardest part was only just beginning.
The first days at home were harder than any physical therapy session. The apartment felt alien, once familiar, now transformed into an obstacle course. Doorways were too narrow, counters too high. Every step demanded focus and energy. Even the shower, the kitchen table, her own bed felt unfamiliar, as if they belonged to someone else. But worst of all was the silence. In the hospital, there was always noise, nurses chatting, machines beeping, footsteps in the hall. At home, there were long stretches of stillness, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the distant sound of traffic. In those quiet hours, the nightmares crept back. Sometimes she woke gasping, certain she was falling again, reaching for a parachute that wasn't there. Visitors came. Neighbors, old friends, even a few strangers who recognized her from the news. They brought flowers, casseroles, balloons. Some stared in awe, asking for stories about the fall, about the moment she realized she was alive. Others whispered behind her back, unsure whether to treat her as a miracle or a warning. Emily smiled politely, but inside she felt more fragile than ever. Jessica became her lifeline, coaxing her outside for short walks, celebrating every milestone. "Look at you, Em, walking down the black. You're a rock star." Emily laughed, though every step was exhausting. Children pointed as she passed. Mothers whispered. Teenagers snapped photos on their phones. The world saw her as a legend, but Emily still felt like a broken girl searching for her place. She tried to reclaim bits of her old life, reading books on the porch, playing with her neighbor's dog, watering her plants, helping her mother cook. Each task felt monumental, each day a marathon. She struggled with anger and shame, furious at her limitations, embarrassed by her scars, terrified that people would always see her as the girl who fell. Sometimes she wondered if she'd ever feel truly normal again. But gradually, life crept back in. She walked a little farther each week. She laughed a little louder. She found herself lingering in the sunshine, letting its warmth seep into her bones.
One day, while sitting on the grass, she noticed how vivid the world seemed, how green the leaves were, how alive the birds sounded, how sweet the breeze felt. She realized she was not just surviving, she was living. As the weeks passed, Emily grew stronger. She met with a therapist, worked through her nightmares, faced her fears one by one. The flashbacks grew less frequent. Hope returned, shy but insistent. She began sharing her story, at first with close friends, then with a small support group, and eventually online where thousands listened. People wrote to her, saying she'd given them courage to face their own fears. For the first time, Emily understood that her pain could help others heal. Still, not every day was easy. There were setbacks. Pain flared, emotions surged, doubts returned. But Emily learned to welcome these moments as part of her journey. She was more than her trauma, more than her miracle. She was a woman learning, step by step, to live in a world she had almost lost. And as she stood one morning at her window, watching the sun rise over the city, Emily Carter promised herself she would keep moving forward, not as a legend or a ghost, but as herself, imperfect, resilient, and fiercely alive. Sometimes it was the touch of her mother's hand, the laughter of Jessica, the warmth of the sun on her face. She learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving forward, one trembling step at a time. Her journey was public, but her greatest battles were fought in silence, facing herself in the mirror, forgiving the parts of her that felt broken, embracing the days when hope was a flicker, not a flame. She discovered that healing was not a straight line. Some days she soared, other days she barely crawled, but always she chose life. Emily spoke to audiences, schools, support groups, even strangers online. She told them the truth, that falling changes you, but surviving transforms you. That every one of us will face a moment when the ground seems to vanish beneath our feet. That sometimes all you can do is close your eyes, breathe, and leap, trusting that even if you fall, you might find wings you never knew you had. In time, she found peace, not in forgetting her fall, but in honoring it. She was not defined by her accident, nor by her pain, but by her relentless drive to rise. Emily learned to savor ordinary moments, the taste of coffee, the sound of rain, the thrill of laughter. She cherished her scars, her fears, her courage. She was, at last, wholly and unapologetically herself. One evening, standing beneath a sky painted gold and violet, Emily closed her eyes and let the wind lift her hair. She no longer felt like she was falling. She was flying, higher than fear, higher than pain,
higher than the day gravity tried to claim her. She had become her own miracle. And somewhere, in every person who heard her story, a seed was planted, a whisper of hope, a call to courage, a reminder that life, no matter how fragile or broken, is worth fighting for. You don't have to fall from the sky to be reborn. Sometimes, surviving is its own kind of flight.